Hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode of Breathe, Darling, the podcast. I am so excited to bring back today's guest to share with us a little bit more about midlife and menopause. You may remember the past episodes when we had Cruz on the podcast, and I can't think of a better time than the month of May, which is Women's Health Month, Maternal Mental Health Awareness Month, and just Mental Health Awareness Month as a time to have her back on the show. So if you want, go back and check out Kara's first episode. It's called It Begins With Us. It's all about this return to self and leaning into building a life that you're proud of, which is, we're all about that here at Breathe, Darling and Emily Riggs Therapy. So definitely go back and check out that episode. But in the meantime, I'm going to remind you a little bit about Kara, or if this is your first touch point with Kara, I've got a little bit more about that too. So our friend Cruz is a licensed marriage and family therapist, private practice owner, and women's mental health advocate. With a focus on reproductive and perinatal mental health, perimenopause, ADHD, anxiety, PTSD, complex trauma, and mood conditions, Kara brings her extensive expertise to our listeners, helping them navigate mental health challenges in a relatable and compassionate way. She runs a ton of different amazing groups and programs. We're going to link them all in the show notes. But I also want you to keep in mind that Kara is also a woman who is navigating her own mental health as both a clinician, but just as a human being. When Kara is not working, she enjoys nature and coastal escapes with her family, and I'm so excited to have her on the podcast today to share her insights into mental health, particularly around this intersection of midlife and menopause. So we spend the first bit of the podcast really leaning into some of Kara's offerings and circling back to this idea of like the authentic self, which is something we see emerge in midlife. Women, for many reasons, feel this renewed permission to say, I've spent the first half of my life people pleasing and being what everyone else expected of me. What could it look like to build a life I'm proud of? So we spend the first good chunk, let's say 45 minutes in that space. And if you want to jump ahead to that content on menopause, perimenopause, jump ahead to about 45, 47 minutes. That's where you're going to find the kind of meat and potatoes, if you will, surrounding that topic. So we are so excited to have you listening in today. We would love to hear from you after this podcast. But in the meantime, let's jump in.
Go. All right. Kara, I'm so excited that we're talking today. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm excited to be talking with you as well. I know last time we talked, we kept going and going, and it was so much fun. So
yeah, I feel that way a lot. Like anybody that I'm having on the podcast, I'm like, who do I find it just really easy to talk to? And when you and I sat down just to kind of chat through, hey, you want to be on the podcast? What could that look like? I was like, why aren't we recording right now?
I know.
So here we are, actually recording. I'm so excited that you're here. Listeners have heard a little bit about you in the intro, just your bio, all the amazing things that you're doing. But I would love for them to hear from you. Who is Kara Cruz? What is your story? What is your journey that kind of brought you to this work that you're doing right now?
Okay, I'll go. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist from California. I spent a lot of time working in community mental health before opening my private practice. And I always really knew that I wanted to do something in counseling, psychology, mental health, from high school. And I didn't go that traditional route because I had a lot of self-doubt. I wasn't sure that it was the best profession. At first, I thought it would be too hard. And then I, was very impressionable and was told by some adults around me that, it would be really hard to make a living as a therapist, that I should go into something more medical, like nursing or even education. And so kind of veered off course and went those routes, and just eventually over time working in the schools, working with people, working with, I would just call them like unofficial mentors that I looked up to in different jobs that I had, kind of just ended up back in the mental health world. And eventually, got my bachelor's degree in psychology, took some time off from school, continued to work, and I was in community mental health at the time. And when I was on maternity leave with my son, I it's funny, everyone's like, "What do you mean you had time?" Well, I think I slowed down my brain enough, and had a little break from just the busyness of that world, working and being very busy and burnt out and tired. I had some time to kind of breathe and get the grad school application complete and figure out what I needed to do. So by the time I went back to work, I was ready to tell my boss, "Hey, I'm going back to grad school next year. I'm waiting to hear where I get accepted and, it'll be next fall." That was just kind of that. So, and then once I went back to grad school, it was like, finished in 2 years, had a job lined up, they actually hired me on as an practicum student, so I had a full-time internship. And I knew just it from my classes, from my cohort, that this is where I was supposed to be. But what I didn't know is that I would be very burnt out for a long time. And so that led me to open my own private practice. So I started out primarily working with children in in that job, in my agency job, and that was where I wanted to be. And then I found out, kind of just learned really quickly that maybe play therapy, working with kids wasn't my favorite thing to do. I had a little one myself, and I felt pretty tired and exhausted. And I found that I really loved working with the moms. I loved working with parents. And there would be times you kind of jokingly in session, a mom would say, "Well, can't you just be my therapist?" And that happened enough to where I thought, "Huh, well, why can't I just be their therapist, and why can't I make a switch?" And so when I opened my practice, that's who I ended up focusing on, was working with women. Not all my clients are moms, but most of my clients are women.
Wow. Oh my gosh, I love hearing about that trajectory for you. Here I was working with the kids, and then I'm resonating with the mom's experiences. I feel like I'm connecting more with them. I wanted to kind of get away from working with kids. It's like here we are in what you're doing now. And you have described to me so many incredible offerings and services that you're providing to women specifically, not just women clients, but other therapists as well. Give us an idea of the plethora of things that you provide.
Yeah, it's took me some time, but finally I figured out a more concise way of explaining what I do. Because my brain, I like to do a lot of things. I'm kind of in the clouds, lots of ideas, and I've got lots of Google Docs and notebooks with ideas. But what I really am doing is I have client facing services, which is providing individual therapy to women. I do some couples work. I do see some men too, and they call, and if it's a good fit, I typically will have one or two that I'm working with at a time. And I provide groups for women, and I was providing a lot of different types of groups and different topics, and perinatal mental health, trauma, ADHD in women, perimenopause. And I just found that that was a little overwhelming to have so many different groups going on. And I found that the one kind of bottom line issue that we were working on was my clients, the women I was working with, really being disconnected from themselves, being overwhelmed, burned out, wearing a mask, not being authentic to themselves. And so I ended up just taking that and creating a group. So one group I call it my signature group now. It's great for my brain because it's focusing on one thing, but it's open to all the different clients I was working with in different groups.
Yeah.
It applies to their experience. And those are the best clients that I work with. Those are the types of clients that kind of light me up, that I feel most energized and excited working with, and that I tend to work with more long term. Not long term because things aren't getting better, but long term because we get to a place where we can get into other things because we've resolved the things that were going on for them when they initially came to therapy. So that's my therapy practice. That's who I see. So primarily it's women, any to 40s, even 20s to 50s, who are really feeling like they are overwhelmed, burnout. They do a lot. I wouldn't say that they're all like, we call themselves like the people pleaser. I know we use that word a lot, but they're often people who have a hard time saying no. They have a hard time putting their needs first or putting their needs on the table at all. And they become tired, overwhelmed, resentful, and just really lose touch with themselves and what they love to do. And yeah, that's my favorite client to work with. I also provide clinical supervision to a small number of associates and trainees in California. And then my other side of my business, which I really, really love, is I provide training. So I provide continuing education trainings on women's mental health topics. And I'm doing something really fun and new this year is had a lot of people reaching out to me asking me, "How do you form your groups? Tell me how the process went for you." Lots of like the little questions, wanting to pick your brain kind of meetings. And so I decided to do a boot camp for therapists who want to create their own reproductive mental health or wellness or therapy group. So it's a 6-week boot camp. where we start kind of from scratch and build their group. We practice delivering kind of their spiel when we're meeting in our small cohort. So it's no more than 12 therapists, and we meet weekly and talk about different topics, and we slowly build their group. So that was a lot of fun. I just finished up the first one, and went really well and got some good feedback, and knew what changes I wanted to make it even better for the next round. So that's going to be what I'm focusing on in the fall, is my women's group and my therapist group boot camp.
Okay, so you alluded to so many things, really, really important topics, especially for that age range that you mentioned, 20s to 50s,
Mhm.
women who are struggling with a variety of things in their mental health, right? Maybe it is a life transition from college to adulthood, right? Maybe it is parenting, motherhood, pregnancy, fertility. And you said not all of them are mothers, right? So we're also talking about women who are experiencing things outside of the confines of parenthood. Maybe it's issues with their partners, career changes, challenges there. But you really nestled it under that overarching theme of wanting to reconnect with themselves. And you had put it to me in the past, the idea of healing from self-abandonment,
Mhm.
building self-trust, and reconnecting to authentic self.
Yeah, that's exactly it. You got it.
Yeah, but I loved it so much because it just step by step just holds their hand and walks them through. Hey, I know you feel so incredibly lost right now. I see where you are, self-abandonment, and I truly believe we can reconnect with who you really are on the other side of this. So let's
Yeah.
start with that topic of self-abandonment specifically. Like, how would you define that? How do you feel like that's typically showing up in women's lives?
Yeah, and it can show up in so many different ways. It's hidden in so many different behaviors and things and patterns that we do, but oftentimes it can be not being in alignment with your values. So you might have a particular value. Maybe your value is of creativity and you're not doing anything creative in your life. You're stuck in a job that you don't like. It's burning you out. You're so tired that you don't have the energy after work to engage in any of the creativity. So you have this value of creativity and you're not in alignment with it at all. It could be you have a value of, family or health and wellness. And again, because of all the things that are going on in your life that you're saying yes to that you don't really want to, you don't have time or energy for any of those things. It could be not upholding boundaries. You know what your boundaries are, but for some reason, when it comes time to, uphold those with others, with yourself, you just don't. So not showing up for yourself is a big one. So a lot of it is, it could be saying yes to others and maybe feeling like we kind of get in this role, like I feel like I'm being taken advantage of, or nobody, whether it's respects me or appreciates me or whatever it is. A lot of times though, it can be that, but more of the theme that I see with my clients is it's really not being committed to themselves and not showing up for themselves and breaking promises to themselves. So when we come back to it, and it's not all the external stuff, because I'm always, kind of going like, is this an external pressure to do this, and this, or is this an internal thing that you want to be doing? And a lot of times we come back to that. I'm doing this thing because I feel like I'm supposed to, and I care about how others view me or receive me or feel, because of my behavior. And because I'm trying to do for all the external pressure, I'm constantly breaking those promises and commitments to myself, the internal. And that was the pattern I was seeing with a lot of my clients. And then it was like, I can relate to that. I've been there and I'm still there sometimes. That's something that some common ground that I had. So I get it. I understand it. I've been there. I have a nice little graphic in my office that I hung up that says, I will keep showing up for myself, because that I saw something like that. And that was such a reminder that I need to be showing up for myself. So I really related to these clients, these women that I was working with, and that disconnection that I want to do this, but I don't follow through. I let myself down. And so that's kind of not a definition, but those are the types of things that I was seeing.
Yeah, and I have to imagine, like you said, it is so varied depending on someone's experience. But what I'm hearing you say is that the concept of self-abandonment is any time that, what was the quote on your office wall, the graphic?
Was I will keep showing up for myself.
So like at its core, it's like self-abandonment is I stopped showing up for myself.
Yeah.
It can look like I stopped advocating for myself. I stopped doing things I enjoy. I stopped asking for help, right? Like I start to believe that I'm in this alone. I have to do this by myself. And I wonder what you're seeing, because I know you said a difference between the external pressure, right? Kind of like systems based ideas that we're all living in day to day, but then that internal pressure as well. How do you feel like societal or cultural expectations contribute to the tendency for women in particular to self abandon?
Yeah. Well, I think that it's just something that's so common, and I don't say normal, but common, that it becomes just automatic, and it's not even something that there's awareness about, because it's just the roles that we take on, the things that we say yes to, like the slight jokes about that's something that like you're really good at, you just go ahead and take it. There's just so many
Yeah.
that you don't until you're paying attention, you're not even paying attention to. When I notice when I work with my clients and we really get down to the root of the not showing up for yourself, a lot of times it has to do with someone not showing up for them, and kind of teaching them that that's just how I'm treated, others treat me, so this is how I'm learning how to treat myself. So not following through with you, somebody breaking promises to you, somebody prioritizing something else over you at a very young age. And that becomes a normal, like, oh, this is just what we do. So why would the person show up for themselves if maybe they're caretakers or care? Not to blame it all on that, but a lot of times it comes down to something from a really young age.
Yeah, I know you and I both work in the area of trauma, whether that's complex developmental trauma, meaning it started from a young age and seeing the through line in a client's life all the way up to present day. Or maybe it is complex trauma in the sense that it wasn't just during childhood, but later on in life. But what you're saying is that this can start really early on by either what was modeled for us, what was expected of us. I think some of what you described earlier when you were explaining self abandonment can sound almost like selflessness,
Yes.
which is generally held up as a positive attribute, especially for women, and to be selfless. I work with and come from some faith-based Christianity specifically spaces in my career past, my personal past, and then even in present day, and that is absolutely upheld as kind of the pinnacle, especially in womanhood, is selflessness, not thinking of ourselves. But
Yeah.
at times can be really wonderful. I'm hearing you say like you've taken it to an extreme
Yeah.
and have really leaned hard into it's not allowed to ever be about me. And sometimes that is a result of trauma. Like you said, a caregiver didn't show up to me for me. Someone constantly broke their promises to me. That's going to show me what my worth is. And
Yeah.
why would I ever believe?
Yeah, somebody else, if my caregiver, my caretaker, my parent, or whoever, someone important in my life, maybe it wasn't even, a lot of my clients have really great, wonderful parents, but there was at some point someone who was important to them that treated them a certain way. And that was okay, well, this is the way this person's treating me, I trust them, then this is how I'm going to treat myself. This is how I'm learning how to treat myself, and that's normal. And that's okay. And the idea of selflessness, it's kind of fun in session to do this with clients because we talk about being selfless. And so I said, so what does that mean? And what it comes down to is it's saying yes when you mean no. And I said, okay, well, let's explore that a little bit. Let's say that you have a really good friend and you ask them for a favor, and which is really hard for a lot of my clients to do, right? We never ask for help, because we don't want to be told we don't
That.
did no, it burden someone, there's all the reasons. But I'll say, so you have a friend, I want you to think of a friend that no matter what or when, if you ask them to do something for you, they are always gonna say yes. And then I want you to think of a friend who will say yes when they mean it and say no when they can't. Which friend do you trust more? And they'll say, "Oh, I trust the one that will tell me no when they can't." I'm less anxious with that person because I'm not overthinking, oh, they said yes. Now I feel bad because I don't think they really want to do this thing, but they said it now. So then it's like, it doesn't ever relieve, you're asking for help and you're asking the person who always says yes, who's a selfless one, right? Who overextends himself. And now it's creating this discomfort and this unease for you because you think that you're burdening them. And now you're kind of wondering and you don't know where you stand because you don't trust where you stand because they always say yes. But the friend that tells you no when they mean no and yes when they mean yes, you trust that. So how do you want to be for others? Do you want to be that person that they trust? When you say yes, you mean yes. And when you say no, you mean no. Like, thought about it that way.
Yeah,
And it's a
really
whole
profound.
perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's fun to kind of see their face. And then, then we go into the whole dialogue about how being kind of a people pleaser and a say yes person um isn't always about being 100% selfless because we get something out of it, and we
And
get
what do we get out of it, Kara?
yeah, Yeah, it takes the burden off of us. We don't feel as bad anymore. By saying yes, it helps us to feel better about ourselves, whether it's to be needed, whether it's to have somebody not mad at us, whether it's to be off the hook with whatever it is, we get something out of it. It's not typically 100% selfless, or it gives others the impression, an impression of us, that we are selfless, whatever it is. It does something for us in turn. So really it's not 100% selfless. And that's not to say not to do things that are helpful and selfless, and we all sometimes will do something we don't want to do because we know it's the right thing and helpful, but is that the pattern and that's what you're doing 100% of the time? That's a difference.
I have often heard it posited, that idea of people pleasing, as it's not actually about pleasing other people, like what you're saying. It's actually about controlling my reputation,
Yeah.
controlling what other people think about me. And if I'm a yes woman, well, Emily is so reliable. Emily is so dependent. Emily is always there for me. And it's like, oh, good. I look good.
Yeah.
And then it's really about control
Yeah.
versus, so that's where our worth comes from, how other people think about us. And I'm not saying that that doesn't have a place. Obviously, I care what the people closest to me think about me, for sure. But that, especially when we're working through this people pleasing, we have to circle back to, and you mentioned our values, our boundaries, what's important to me, and what do I think about me? Right? Am I proud of me? Am I proud of how I'm showing up in the world? Am I honoring my needs, showing up for myself? And I don't know about you, especially female clients and that kind of thing. It's what's been modeled for us is to not. And my mother passed away during the pandemic, but that was the model that I had, was like constant selflessness. Now I feel like I see it differently. I see like a self-abandonment to the point of, I don't have my own interests. I don't have my own hobbies. I don't even have my own friendships. And
Yeah.
what does that look like? And I'm not saying that she didn't lead this incredible life, but it gives you pause, especially with parenting, right? You have a son, I have a daughter. What are we handing down to them? What are we modeling for them? Not just as women, but as people.
Yeah. Yeah. And in the immediate, it might feel good, especially as a mother or parent, to be that selfless person for your child and then not, kind of abandon yourself. But you know what? I work with a lot of adults and they either have a parent who is really harsh and critical, borderline kind of emotionally abusive kind of personality realm, which they had their own trauma, complex trauma, but or they have a parent who kind of did everything for them and then or sacrificed so much for their kids. And now as an adult, these clients have so much guilt because now they're leading their own lives and they feel like they're leaving their mom or their parent behind. Versus the one where the parent who's like, "Oh, she's gardening, she is like doing her own thing,"
Their
their
life.
belief like, "I don't have to worry about mom, she's got her thing going on. I'm not worried about her being lonely or being depressed because now that she's not, I don't need her as much anymore. I feel like my mom's like got her own sense of self. She does her own thing. She's confident. She's capable." Yeah. So it ends up like just prolonging the burden that it puts on the children into their adulthood.
I've never thought about it that way before.
Mm.
That's really, really interesting.
Yeah.
I think we start to like kind of step into the waters of like codependency there. And, and that is just a topic for a whole
That's
other
a whole other,
episode. So,
yeah.
yeah, but I think it's really important that we're distinguishing that difference, because I think selflessness has its place. I mean, gosh, you talked about parenting specifically. I think about it in my friendships. Are there times where like I don't really want to go do that, but it's your birthday, so I'm gonna do what you want to do. That's selfless, you know what I mean? Because I want to celebrate you and I love you. Same with parenting. Like, we have a child who will not sleep. God love her. Well, I just don't want to. I don't want to get up with you in the middle of the night, so I'm just not gonna. And it's like, well, something more is required here, that I set aside what I need or what I want in this moment. The problem is, and I think this is what you're saying, is when we do that all the time and
Yeah.
we lose ourselves entirely, our sense of self. I talk about this a lot with clients. Our
Mhm.
sense of self just evaporates because after years, decades, even, we sort of come up for air, maybe because we're in therapy, because we're struggling in our relationships with resentment, burnout, etc. And we're like, I don't even know who I am. I don't even know what I like. I don't even know how I would describe myself to other
Yeah.
people outside of the roles that I play in other people's lives.
Yep. I don't know what I like. I don't know what I enjoy. I don't know what I'd even want to do. They feel very lost, very disconnected. And we take it to take it back way back to childhood and say, okay, so tell me when you were, and they think sometimes they'll think it's a silly question, but when you were 7 years old on, and some of my clients experience trauma, so I'm really careful how I word this, but I'll say on a day that felt safe enough for you, that felt like it was a happy day, you had no plans. There was nothing on the agenda. You didn't have parents kind of steering your day. You got to do whatever you wanted to do that was fun and safe. What would you choose to do? And we kind of just go back to that constantly. Like, what were you drawn to do? Not the piano lesson that you hated and that your parents made you go to. So you're practicing, but like, were
Mhm.
you laying on the floor coloring? Were you outside making mud pies? Were you collecting bugs? Were you playing vet with your cat? What were you doing? And and even though that might not be something that they're into today, it leads us to something that's
It's
a
a
little
threat.
bit of it's a thread that leads us to, being able to connect with what do I like? What do I enjoy? Where do I find peace and comfort?
Yeah. Which is, I think, a lot of therapy speak would talk about your inner child, right? And they're
Mhm.
connecting
Yeah.
to this version of you. I love that language that you use of like a safe enough day.
Mhm.
What you maybe would have said was a good day. And what were you drawn to? I think that's really beautiful. And I'm seeing a lot more, especially when it comes to treating complex trauma, where we're talking about play, maybe the kind of play that we never got to have because of
Mhm.
our childhood experiences, because of being adultified or parentified, right? Needing to care for others immediately from the get go, or just because of adversity, having an ill parent, having a parent with addiction, right? It's a whole host of things that have gone on, but they maybe never had the opportunity, or they're just so disconnected from that version of themselves that
Yeah.
the support you're providing, it sounds like that first step around um, healing from self abandonment is reconnecting with
Yeah.
something that feels almost like low hanging fruit. This healing isn't this wildly intense process. It can be something as simple as like, did you pick up a coloring book and some crayons? 20
Yeah.
minutes on a weeknight? Like, let yourself.
Could be Yeah, it could be sit in the backyard with your dog and stare at the trees, like,
Yeah.
and then we get into and that's usually where we get into, "Well, I felt bad doing that, like, I should be doing something. Well, I should be and that's where we get it's like, "Hold on, like, let's take it back. Let's just be in, like, the uncomfortable of just being." Whether you're reading a book on the couch for 3 hours or you're sitting outside with your dog throwing the ball, and then you're, like, looking at, "Oh, I can only throw the ball for 20 minutes." That takes us into the other stuff, those
Yeah.
I'll have to ask them, when they have a hard time identifying that thing that they love to do, I'll say, "Well, what what would you get in trouble for doing kind of like too long? Like where you get really into like the zone of, oh, all I did was wanted to color, yeah, or all I wanted to do was
Yeah.
like just go outside and I would be so sad when it would get dark and I'd have to come in." And
Yeah.
those are the things, those things that you were just
Mhm.
and for some of our clients with a lot of trauma, childhood trauma, sometimes those activities happened at school. So sometimes it might be what was the thing at school that you were really wanting to do, and then when it was time to switch to math time, were you really sad about? So sometimes it will be at school, at daycare, at or childcare, or it'll be when they were doing something more structured in a safer area, a place.
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. I feel like so many people, I know myself included, like need this reminder of coming back to ourselves. And I think, especially, I know you work with a lot of mothers who are perinatal mental health certified, and we lose ourselves a lot in that postpartum period. I happen to come at it that we're postpartum for the rest of our lives. So this is probably going to be an uphill battle for a long time. But yeah, I just love the way that you house that, and even some really concrete, I don't want to say simple because I can understand how it can be really hard, really complex for some of us, but there's kind of concrete steps that people can take to heal from that self abandonment, which I think brings me to kind of that next point in the work that you do, which is building self trust. How does that connect here? What does that look like for you
Yeah.
when you're working with someone?
Well, what it usually shows up with is decision making, doubting decisions, an inner self critic usually comes into play during this time. It's about I didn't make a right choice. I made a mistake. I didn't make a decision at all. I kind of froze. I stayed stuck and not making it. I really need a lot of reassure. Like there's common words that start to come up when I know we're kind of in that realm of like the work. And so building self-trust, it is really going from like really teaching them. I use the external, internal a lot because I can visualize that external pressure of I want to do this, but then now I'm thinking about what's like my partner going to say? What is my parent going to say? What is my boss going to say? So that's where I know, okay, we're worried about others. And then and then there's a lot more work that goes into that. But if we didn't have to worry about any of that, it was just something you wanted to do, you wanted to choose, we start there. And sometimes they still have a hard time. And that's when we go, I mean, we're kind of already going into the body stuff, but we go right into the body. So when I ask you this and we kind of weigh out the decisions of this or this, what does your body say or do? And then that's usually where we get a lot of the answers is like, oh, there's like my body feels like stuck or frozen or kind of like repelled by it. And they start to do things like this with their hands. Or they seem, or when they open up or their eyes light up or they start smiling or they lean in, then I really, we're working on using the body, what's happening in your body and tuning in and we're getting out of the head. We're not talking as much in these sessions. We're really just pausing. We're noticing sensation. And this is when, clients who are safe enough to tolerate, some people are not safe do not feel safe in their bodies right away. So we really have to build up to this and that takes time and therapy. But when we're there, it's pausing and just sitting and noticing when something shifts, when something changes, when your body is telling you no, when your body's telling you yes, what's the difference? And it's like practicing like you're at the gym, and you're working out at school and then you're really comfortable with, okay, I know what that feels like. I know what that, there's the jaw clenching. There's a lump in the throat again. And my favorite thing is when someone comes back to session and says, Kara, this thing happened. All of a sudden, like I felt my body do this thing and I stopped and I paused and I just with it. And then it's like I didn't need someone else to tell me what to do or to walk me through it. I really like was the guide myself on what I needed to do next. And even like sometimes they're not ready to change the behavior or to make a change in how they navigate it, but they know there's insight now. And
There's awareness.
yes, and then that's where we're at. And so that's really a lot of the self-trust comes from that type of work. It's really getting in the body, really checking in with yourself. It's not about me telling them or even giving them it's really like you're guiding and you're seeing what comes up for them and then what do they notice about that? So I'm an EMDR trained therapist too, so a lot of times,
Yeah.
we'll start getting into things right there, and a lot of discovery in those sessions. Those are a lot of fun. Yeah, a lot of aha moments that I see for my clients when we're working on self trust.
Yeah, I love that idea that the self-trust begins in the body, right? So much of this time we're talking about that difference between like the body and the brain, which obviously are connected, right? One literally cannot function without the other. But we talk about ourselves as so segregated.
Yeah,
And so to sort of like bring those two parts together.
yeah,
When that's coming up for you, when that thought is happening, what are you noticing here? Because we
yeah,
as a society are so cerebral. Talk about self-abandonment.
yeah,
We're,
yeah.
we're just abandoning our bodies at every turn. The number of women I work with and personally who have chronic illness and have just learned to like bypass pain out of survival, right? Especially if we've only known pain, have to figure out a way to survive, to get
Override.
yeah, override exactly. And that self-abandonment I think does lead us to not trust ourselves to make the best decisions, to know what's best for us. I mean, the number of women I work with where regret is a profound struggle and we don't trust ourselves to make good decisions for our lives.
Yeah.
I see that come up a lot and it's hard to work with, right? Because you can't just like convince someone, no, like you did the best you could with what you have. And I think that there can be comfort from those sentiments, but
Yeah.
how do I learn to trust myself again?
Yeah. In those situations, like that's kind of where the part it starts to come up. Like, well, honor, like, well, you want to be in your brain, you're a thinker, you're a talker, a processor. What is your logical brain saying? But what's your body saying? What is your regretful part saying? What's happening? And then who's at the table and how are all these parts in your life and these parts of you, how have they kept you safe when that's all they had to work with at the time, and can we honor and give appreciation to those parts of you? So that part that feels regret, it's something happened to where there was like safety in whatever decision you made. There was more safety. Maybe there wasn't complete safety, but there was more safety with this option versus this option. Yeah. So that's, yeah, we get into getting out of the, also honoring that some, for those of us and thinkers and like to kind of, we need to allow some space for that. But can we allow your body to kind of guide us?
Yeah, I guess I'm hearing maybe even a precursor to self-trust is some self-compassion, which I know for the high achieving perfectionists among us, we're like, ew, what's compassion? You
Yeah.
know,
Oh,
everyone else gets to have it
yeah.
except for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
A friend needs to have it, but not me. It's different for me.
Yeah, I will
Yeah.
often very lovingly and with a tone of humor, like say to my clients, like, you're not that special to be the exception
Hmm.
to that rule. You know what I mean? Why does everyone else get compassion and you don't, you know? And jumping into some of what that means. Yeah, it sounds like you have a pretty, I don't want to say like regimented, but again, I go back to that word, like concrete, some really helpful steps that you offer your clients and the women in your groups on how to reconnect with themselves. Which I think it sounds like we're healing from that self abandonment. We are building that self trust again, but then that reconnection to the authentic self, which is sort of that third piece of the puzzle. What does that
Yeah.
look like? How are you seeing that? What does it look like for a client to live, or just not even a client, a woman, right? To live from her authentic self?
Oh yeah, their body language changes. They light up. It's so funny because I'll sometimes see even from session to session, like I'll just in their appearance. And I don't mean like we're looking at appearance, but all of a sudden I will see a client will show up and a bright color if that's their thing. And they'll be wearing lipstick. And it's not about like makeup and hair, but there's just like this like freedom to just, sometimes the one that has like the hair perfectly kind of straight and polished will come in with like natural. There's just something that changes. It's like freeing. And it's really cool to see that. I don't even think that they notice. It's just like this, it's energy. It's their energy is different. It feels different. And yes, it starts kind of sometimes from their appearance, but then there's just something in them that shifts and is different. And there's like the critical part of themselves, the part of themselves who wants to be liked and all those other things doesn't go away, but that part almost just kind of like takes a back seat and allows that true version of them to really shine and come through. And there, those other parts are still watchful to make sure that they're safe, but it's just doing things that they want to do, saying no and kind of laughing like, no, I didn't. It's weird. I didn't feel as bad as I would have felt before. Like maybe that
Yeah.
little tinge of it was there, but I said no and I didn't feel guilty, or I said yes to this other thing and I didn't feel embarrassed or silly. That shift just kind of like happens and you see it, you feel it, it's in the energy.
Mhm.
And those old really protector parts really just kind of you see them just kind of stepping back and they're still there. They're assigned new jobs and they're there if needed, right? Like they'll come back if they're needed. And fine, but it's my favorite thing to see is to see those little glimpses of them, that authentic version of themselves coming through in session.
That's so
And one thing
awesome.
I like to mention too, though, is it's like with any kind of therapy, it's not like your therapist or the person you're working with holds the key and is going to completely unlock it and everything's going to change. That person really has to be in a space where they're able to get uncomfortable and to do something different because things aren't going to change until somebody changes something. And so I
Yeah.
said then that it really like that's the whole kind of the name of the group, the name of the workshop I do is it begins with you. Because it does begin with you. It's not like there's this magic program you're gonna do, this magic people think that, like, if I get healthy and I lose weight, all of a sudden my life's gonna change, or if I make more money, my life's there something has to start with you, and you have to be willing to be uncomfortable, you have to be willing to get out of a comfort zone and to make a change, willing to put yourself out there and be seen, willing or able or feel safe enough to take a risk and make a mistake, safe enough to be successful, and that some people are afraid of being happy and successful or feeling peace. That's the fear. So, and and it can be frustrating. Like sometimes, frustrating. Like in a sense, I get frustrated with my clients, but it can be hard to witness sometimes when the client is kind of like showing up and coming to therapy every week and doing their thing, and they are like, I'm stuck. I'm stuck. This isn't working, or that's not working, and it's because there's not a magic solution. It really has to start with that person being ready and willing and wanting and sometimes they just can't be. They're like at the time that they're at. And that's just where they're at. And so accepting that as a therapist can be a challenge to witness and see, because there's not like a magic wand, that we wave. Um, Healing and change really has to start with the person.
Yeah, I think it's so important though that you just named those fears. I mean, a question I wanted to ask you was, what are some common fears that women express or face when they're doing this work of trying to root out who is my authentic self? And the fact that you mentioned, like, we're actually afraid of peace, we're afraid of success, not necessarily monetarily, but like success in our relationships, connection, success in career, right? But so much of what you're saying is we have to be willing to step out, to do something different. I so often say in therapy and in my personal life, like, nothing changes if nothing changes.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
so we have to be willing, even however small that change is.
Yeah.
It's so much of what you're describing too, not only in the work of our client relationships, right, as therapists and clients sitting in the therapy space together, but I also talk a lot about female friendships specifically. Not that our cross gender friendships don't matter, but just so much of my audience is females, right? And the safety that can come in our female relationships or in our relationships with a therapist, that safety is the precursor to all of what you're saying in terms of the healing from self abandonment, like self trust, and reconnecting with the authentic self. Like, if we don't feel safe, none of that's going to happen. What I'm hearing you say is also honoring the pace that it's happening at for whoever's in front of you, friend, client, or otherwise. And it's like,
Yeah.
I really want this for this person. I care so deeply about them as a client. I love them as my friend. I would really love to see this for them. But if they're not ready, they're not ready. What can I do? How can I support them? I can be a safe place.
Yeah. Yeah. You're just with them where they're at, and thinking about what does it bring up for us when our friend isn't making the change, when our sister, when our client or whoever it is isn't able to make the change, because it brings something up for us that's uncomfortable. And it's whether like we can't tolerate seeing them in pain, or we feel like we were trying to help them, and because they're not changing, we're not doing a good job. That brings up our own stuff. That's a fun topic in supervision, that I like to work with the on. But and it's not up to us. It's meeting them where they're at, and even just checking in with them, like, how does it feel to be where they're at? And just being there is, sometimes what people need and what they're ready for. And for some, you see where they're just right on that like point where they're gonna say something out loud, or admit something to themselves, or come up with some kind of conclusion, and I see them hold back. And a lot of times I know what that is, because it means like, well, if I say this out loud or acknowledge this, I'm almost like, now I feel accountable that I have to do something about it. And if I don't do something about it, that brings up something that's more uncomfortable than staying stuck. Like, maybe like it means something about my marriage or my relationship. Maybe it means something about the job I'm in. And because I'm recognizing that if I change it, it's going to cause a lot of discomfort, whether it's financial discomfort, whether it's, a lot of hardship, whether it's I'm going to do really well and then be vulnerable because there's so many different things. And sometimes the safer option is to stay where they're at,
Yeah. Yeah.
or the perceived safer option, however you want to look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's interesting, we haven't brought this up, like how we ended up meeting, but I think a lot of what you're saying alludes to um, the work that we both have talked about doing. And we actually met in the context of a business mastermind group of other female therapists who are looking to do something new, to launch something. Maybe it's a dream they've been sitting on for a long time and have been afraid to step out on. Maybe it's something that they're like, I don't know what it is, so I'm looking for support in drawing it out and starting to create it. And I think what I actually walked away from, I really haven't done what I thought I would do or offer what I thought I would offer, but what I've actually walked away from is just the courage, because in the safety of that group and in those relationships of like-minded, vulnerable women who are saying, I'm scared. This feels like a lot. I'm going through X, Y, or Z. And on top of running my own business and supporting my clients and supporting my family. And I don't know if I can do this, but I always want to try. And just the courage kind of rippled out in that group environment. And to know that you're offering this kind of care to women in a therapy group or kind of coaching group space, it sounds like there would be a lot of power in that.
Yeah. Yeah. There really is. And that's why I started the group, is because I was seeing all these women individually. And it's like the idea that you keep thinking they all need to be in the same room together, like
Mhm.
these two people have the same like wild dad story, or they have like the stuck place, or one's on the other side of something. And like you see people that like when they're in connection and in the room with other people who are going through it, there's something different than being one-on-one therapy. There's a time and a place for it. And there's some things in
Totally.
group aren't appropriate to bring up in group that are better for one-on-one and vice versa. But it was the idea of like I was repeating the same things over and over again, or sharing the same tools or strategies, or like asking the same types of questions. And I thought like, I'm saying this over and over and repeatedly, and this is what's kind of like the light bulb for some people, or this is the moment when they have that aha. I need to get people all in the same room at the same time. And so that's kind of where the group came from, was what were the kind of the foundational like issues or tools I was using, and let's put that into a group. Because,
Yeah.
even though all these women have different experiences, whether some are parents, some are not, some are professionals, some are just starting out, some are not even sure what they want to do, some are, retired, whatever it is, they all had this common ground. And so creating a space for them to be, and because I found that I've been in masterminds, I've been in coaching groups, I've done my own group therapy on different topics that were relevant to what I was going through. I kept thinking I would be sad when they would end, or feel like, oh man, I want to go back and ask that person from my group or my cohort this question, or check in with the group. And um, feeling that draw back to that told me like that was helpful, that was impactful.
That's so smart. And I think what an awesome way to continue to share from your knowledge and expertise what you're seeing come up over and over and over. And how do I make this more accessible? How do I, even maybe potentially as a therapist, right, use my time and capacity a little bit more strategically to actually support more people at once? I think that's really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. And I think the unfortunate thing sometimes with groups is sometimes groups have like this, because a lot of people will join a business group, a mastermind, a community, no problem. But when you hear groups, I think people have this old, and there are still groups like this out there, but like this old mindset of it's just like talking about problems, never making change, bad, like support group. And I run support groups, and support groups I run, I don't feel like they're like that. But I think people see group, or they see support group or women's group or wellness group, and they automatically think of that kind of old
Like dark
version.
church basement with stale
Yeah.
coffee. And you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
With really bad coffee that's been reheated, and like old
Yes.
donuts, and yeah. And that's not what this is at all. I'm trying to with legal and ethical consideration to like it is like in that therapy realm, although it's not a therapy group. I'm not diagnosing. You don't have to have a medical diagnosis to join, but we do use therapeutic approaches, so it's only open to California residents.
Mm.
Trying to pull the things that I felt were impactful in the groups that I was in into what I'm doing, so it's not like that, just that old school type of group.
Yeah. Oh, that's huge. I would love to shift gears, and it's not actually a complete departure, but something that we actually originally talked about having you on the podcast was drilling down a little bit more into some of the reproductive health components that women might experience and how that impacts their mental health. Now, I see the through line of healing from self-abandonment and building self-trust and connecting with your authentic self as it relates to these very specific concerns that women face. I know something that you and I talked about specifically was perimenopause and menopause and how they affect us as women. This is absolutely this emerging topic, especially in mental health. We're sort of seeing, oh, wait, that's not just a medical concern. And it's not just hot flashes. Newsflash for everyone, if you didn't know, it's not just a hot flash and then we're done. But
Yeah.
I feel like I'm seeing so much more around this. And I love the idea of equipping women with the information to self advocate. I think, again,
Yeah.
still just fits under this umbrella of the work that you do 1000%. But yeah, I would love to maybe talk about that a little bit more. How do you support women going through these seasons of life?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is, because it is something that all biological women will go through in their life if they live long enough, menopause and perimenopause, it's inevitable. It's not like you can take this special class and a special supplement and you're never going to, yeah, stay away from those types.
Uh-oh.
There are things that can be helpful and alleviate and make you feel connected and feel better taking care of yourself. Yes. But the idea is like, you're going to go through it no matter what. Some women will go through it and it'll impact them more than others, particularly those who, if they ever had a pregnancy or postpartum period and they found that it was a struggle or they were really sensitive to like hormonal shifts, they should really be kind of on the lookout to be paying attention like once they reach their mid to late 30s, early 40s. And yes, mid to late 30s, some will be told that that's too young. It's not. Perimenopause can start at that time. But any type of sensitivity to sleep disturbance, hormone shifts, if they already have underlying mental health conditions such as bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety, trauma, of course, any of that can make them more susceptible. Neurodivergent women, so ADHD, autism, those who are like really sensitive to any kind of shifts and changes. And what that is there's a whole list of physical symptoms and mental health symptoms. We often hear a lot about kind of mood swings, but rage, anger, irritability, panic attacks, even for people who've never experienced a panic attack or maybe had a like a big trauma that they can relate back to, will all of a sudden start to have symptoms of panic, restlessness in their body, trouble sleeping, mental health symptoms that will just really shake them. And the interesting thing is that when it's outside of the period and the hot flashes, a lot of times there won't even be this connection like this could be this. It's just I'm doing something wrong. I'm not resting well enough. I'm not eating well enough. I'm not exercising enough. I'm not taking care. It's always back to like you're doing something wrong that's causing these perimenopause menopause symptoms. And it's not even like connected to like there's not even the thought that these experiences are
Are
connected
related. Yeah.
until they're told that these are common symptoms. Well, that makes sense why all of a sudden, I cannot stand my partner. I lost my
Right.
patience with my partner. I'm impatient with my kids and now I feel extreme guilt about it because I snapped at my children or I don't feel as competent at work. I'm not with it. There's just like something about me. I don't feel like me. It's more common for women to get divorced in their 40s. Depression and suicide rates go up in the 40s. And I'm not saying, there's research and people have to go and kind of go and do their own research and see what the studies are saying and what the link is. But to me, it doesn't seem like it's just like, oh, what a coincidence, that these things are happening. So absolutely this period can impact a person. And this is oftentimes when they'll either come back to therapy or go to therapy for the first time because even those who are disconnected and not kind of living their authentic self, they were kind of like white knuckling life and just getting through it and could manage. And then as soon as something like pregnancy, postpartum, or perimenopause happens, it's like, when you're in crisis, like you no longer have access to all those tools to keep it together.
Yes.
You're just out there in the ocean, like riding the waves, and you have no capacity to tolerate what you were tolerating before. So
Mm.
sometimes it's a good thing because it actually brings people to getting help and asking for help because they're so overwhelmed that they can't kind of like bottle it back up and get it together.
Mhm.
And for others, it's not so good because it can get really bad. They go out and reach for help or they are afraid to reach out for help for whatever reason. So raising awareness and talking about it and making the conversation very normal and common is, I think, the most important thing. So that there's not a discomfort when we talk about aging and getting older. People hear menopause, perimenopause, like, I don't even want to talk about that. I don't want to think about that.
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
Stigma. So the more we're talking about it, teaching and helping women know where to go for support, to go for accurate information, it really does need to be with a menopause expert. Not all health and mental health professionals are trained. And we know for like you and I were both perinatal mental health specialists from grad school. We weren't trained in perinatal mental health,
Yeah.
thoroughly. We had to go out and seek our own training, which if you think about how much of the population has a perinatal period, that definitely should be something that's covered,
Yeah,
in
absolutely.
grad school. Yeah. So
Absolutely.
same with perimenopause. Not all medical practitioners, and it's not their fault. Their medical schools are, I think there's a statistic I read. I can't remember if it was like 12% of programs talk about menopause. It's something. It's really low, whatever it is. They don't even teach them about it in their medical school or their education preparation to become a doctor or medical professional. A lot of programs.
Yeah, I'm seeing more through this lens, right? So I got my perinatal mental health certification. So then you've got a whole new lens of like how you see that population that you're working with. I also have a lot of women, much like you, who we are 40s, mid to late 40s into our 50s. And I have this new lens, especially from what I've learned from you and a couple of other providers of seeing that as perimenopause, right? They're struggling with more overwhelm, but they're like, nothing's changed. Like, I just don't feel like I can keep up. I feel like at work, my brain, I'm foggy. I can't concentrate. And, a lot of times we feel like, is that ADHD? Like, what am I seeing here? Right. And yeah, maybe a very late diagnosis of that kind of thing. But then you're also like, hang on a second. You're right on the cusp there of this potentially being big shift in your not even just your physical hormonal experience, right? But that the mental, emotional side of things too. It's almost like we give women a license that when we are, and sometimes I think it's used against us. A lot of times I think it's used against us, right? If we are premenstrual, if we are perinatal, if we are postpartum, it's sort of like there's an understanding, like, okay. And some of this really has just emerged, right? If we're honest, in the last couple of decades, but like, okay, we have an understanding that this is not only affecting you physically, but changes in your hormones are absolutely affecting your mental and emotional well being. Got it.
Mm-hmm.
But even with the perinatal population, right, postpartum, we're like, okay, 2 weeks, you should be back to good, right? You're fine. And that expectation. And same with perimenopause and menopause. I think there's that expectation that this should be this kind of like short-lived thing, be as inconvenient or be as convenient as possible, because heaven forbid what you're going through inconvenience someone else, right? But just kind of like stuff this down, keep it tight in a little box. I'm just sweating. It's fine. I'll be over it. Please continue the meeting. Please continue whatever we were doing. And I just feel like women don't necessarily get the credit that this is a profound shift in their physical, mental, and emotional well-being.
And it can be going on for years.
Years. And it
Just
doesn't have to be horrible, because like you said, it can actually lead people to reach out for help that maybe they wouldn't have otherwise. So like, we're grateful for that connection. But it sounds like, and just everything I'm reading, women are not often receiving the support that they need when they seek it out. And like you said, that leads to hesitation, lack of expertise, etc.
Yeah, oftentimes they're being told it's not that you're too young. We checked your hormones. That's not what's going on, which the menopause experts say that for perimenopause, they don't do, they may run hormone panels and do tests just to have it, but that's not what they're using to like formally diagnose that this is a perimenopause stage. They're going off of the person's symptoms and what's happening for them, because the hormones can change from, week to week to month and be all over the place for years. And so that's not an accurate, read, and I'm not a doctor. I'm not saying that, but that's, so when somebody comes to me and says that their doctor did a blood test and said it can't be that because of that, then that's already kind of like, okay, like let's go to the Menopause Society website and see if we can find, or let's ask your doctor if they might recommend a reproductive health specialist, whether it's like for psychiatry, if it's more impacting their mental health, or it's physical. So maybe we find EGYN who also has, perimenopause or menopause training. Let's ask them first, or let's just kind of refer you out, because there's already some things that will come up that they'll say, and I'm like, okay, or they're 39 years old and they're saying, you're too young, it couldn't be this. That's kind of like a flag to say, hey, maybe we need to kind of get you in the room, or at least a consult with a menopause expert, because that's not what the research and training and experts are saying. But the positive thing that I kind of like to laugh about and say is helpful is that, a lot of women during this stage are going through it's like the I don't give a what stage of life. And like, they're not tolerating as much anymore because they don't have the capacity to. And sometimes that can be a good thing, because that's the thing that kind of pushes them to motivates them to seek out help, to not take no for an answer, to get some answers, to find other people who are experiencing this, whether it's in a group or whether it's through, a professional who's trained, but they'll get a little bit of energy, some healthy anger to get the help that they need.
Yes. Yeah. It sounds like it's what can be, I know you alluded to, like, obviously there's a side of it that if someone doesn't get support, this could be really, really difficult and potentially tragic, but that it serves as a tipping point for a lot of women. Like, and I guess this is where I see it tying into the self-abandonment and self-trust, authentic self and you see this all the time on social media. I have friends and family who fully endorse it. I'm in my late 30s and I'm 100% there. I'm like, I do not have time or energy anymore to give a what about this. Or about like, oh, is this doctor going to be upset with me if I push back and I ask for a referral? Okay, I'm going to find a new doctor. Like, I'm going to get
I don't care if anyone's mad at me. I don't really care. I don't have time for this. I'm not doing this. I'm saying no. There's like
Yes.
that energy is like that's the energy we can work with because it's energy, you know.
Yes, yeah, we're making that shift
That.
for ourselves. It's just so interesting, and I appreciate you, like, kinda teasing that out, that there is this shift that can happen for the positive, where we're like, "Life has been really hard up until this point. I've done a lot of people pleasing. I've done a lot of self-abandoning. I've lived perfection." I'm literally talking about myself right now, and I just got to a point where I was like, "No," because at this point, I'm living according to someone else's expectations and being as convenient as possible to other people. I'm making myself small. And it was like
Yeah.
I had a daughter, and all of a sudden I was like, oh no, this
Yeah.
is not the story I'm handing down to her. This is not the template I'm handing down. Now, obviously, I'm going to encourage her. Be kind, be respectful, right? But
Yes.
be yourself. Ask for what you need. Take up
Yeah.
space. And I think so much of this reservation, especially when it comes to advocating for ourselves and our health later on in life, is that, right? This concern of rocking the boat. But I love that you're saying, you're seeing more and more women saying, let's rock.
Yeah. Well, they're saying, how do they come to me and say, how can I just learn how to like, care more about that? And it's like, maybe you don't. Maybe you need to not give a you know what.
Yeah.
Maybe that's
Uh-huh.
okay. And that's gonna be the energy that's gonna like allow you to make some change. Is like, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm sorry. I'm not gonna like your distress tolerant. Like, I don't have the patience and tolerance for that. So maybe that's actually a good thing. Is because you're gonna set some boundaries now and you're gonna say no more easily because you have this little bit of fire in you. And
Yeah.
healthy fight response is actually what we want access to. We don't want this shut down, reserved, appeasing, fawning response. We want like this. I'm going to set a boundary. Doing it maybe if there's like a really like it's a big explosion of it, we can see if we can kind of
Or pull it in, right? Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
we can work with it, but maybe we need to let it out for a little bit. We need to hear that part of you. We need to see what's going on, and there's some truth to what you just don't have the capacity to hold it all in anymore, and that might be a good thing for you.
That might be a good thing. I don't know about you, but a lot of the women I see and the women around me are really hesitant about anger, almost as if I allow myself to be angry, that is all I'll ever be.
Yeah.
Like it will just
It's
take
like
over.
with sadness or, depression. If I allow myself to feel this, I might not be able to come out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the same thing with anger is if I allow myself to get to that level, I might not be able to bring it down. With that, I just go back into like the nervous system, like education on what's happening in the nervous system. And I talk about actually, we want to have the first response we want is access to healthy fight. Like we do like the bear in the woods kind of thing. If
Yeah.
like, you see a bear in the woods, like, if you don't have access to healthy, that's the first thing we want is like, you can like get away or you can like get the bear away from you, raise your hands big, whatever it is, depending on the type of bear. But,
Yeah.
we want that access. And when that's not available or setting boundaries, that's healthy fight, saying no, setting a boundary, kind of putting your foot down. If that's not
Assertive. Yeah.
yeah, be assertive, be direct. If that's not accessible, then we go to flight and then we kind of go through. So sharing it kind of in that sense, that's always really helpful for my clients. They're like, oh, I'm supposed to go to that first. I'm supposed to be angry. Like, yeah. Are you supposed to throw the chair across the room? Yeah, maybe not. But like saying no, being assertive and direct is healthy
Mhm.
fight. We want a fight response. We want access to that. But how do we work with it? If we're never using it, it's going to build up or it's going to we're going to completely shut down. So
Yeah.
we need to be able to
Yeah.
have that. And
Yeah.
so that's why you're in therapy. So if there's a big response right now, then let's see what that part of you needs to say or
Yeah.
needs to share.
Give it some space, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But then
Not
how
getting
do
rid of it. We're not shutting it down, just like anxiety, like the
yeah.
idea of getting rid of your anxiety. No, you don't want to ever get rid of your anxiety because if you're being followed by a stranger who might hurt you, you want the hairs to stand up on the back of your neck. You want your to raise. You want to have access to anxiety. Do we want it happening all the time? No. So
Right.
no.
Right. Absolutely. I'm so grateful for just the ways that you're housing this conversation, both here and I know in your presence on social media, the groups that you're offering, et cetera, is just a ton of empowerment. And it's so encouraging to see.
It's okay to, yeah, be yourself and say what you feel. And again, we're not taking it to the other end of like we're doing things to intentionally harm people or we're not
Right.
caring about. It's not that.
Right.
It's okay to be you, and it's okay that not everyone agrees with you. It's okay that not everyone likes you. And it's okay to say no and to set your boundaries. And once we kind of get past that and are able to do that, I just see a change and a shift in people that's like, okay, this just feels so freeing and I feel so open and I feel very connected. And they tend to draw in actually people that are like better people in their lives too. The friends that are like a better fit for our friend, the jobs that are a better fit for them,
Yeah.
the environments, places that they want to like, because you're showing up as you and people see you who you really are.
Yeah. That was going to be a question I asked when we were talking about in terms of like your authentic self and expressing that. What are you recommending to women um, who feel like they're navigating relationships or environments that may not support that authentic expression?
Yeah, I usually just ask them, I start with what are you getting out of that? And I don't mean it like in a, well, what are you getting out of that? Like you're supposed to just be taking, but you're staying in it because you are getting something, some kind of like reward or something that feels helpful or feels safe or that feels something. So let's just start with what you're getting from it and why you're in it still and then go from there and see that where that takes us. Because can you get that somewhere else that's more helpful for you? Sometimes it's not about leaving like a situation or an environment or friendships. It's not about that. It's sometimes just you kind of change and set a new tone for that relationship going forward. So it's not about like burning bridges and like, I don't need that anymore. I'm going to leave
Yes.
that. It doesn't start. It's not about that. Sometimes that does happen, but it can just be about changing the tone of that relationship, the dynamic, and just shifting something, you know?
I so appreciate that you drew that distinction of like, because I'm sure you're seeing it too all the time on social media. It just came up in another podcast interview, but the idea of like, everyone's a narcissist, go no contact, cut them out of your life. Like, the boundary means you're not in my life anymore. And I just am like, no, like that, there's no room for nuance there. There's no
No.
room for personal history in that relationship. There's no room for compassion or grace or anything. There are going to be times where that has to happen for your safety, but also that's not a prescription that we write.
So I'm very, what's the word? I don't say against sounds very like extreme, but all or nothing thinking is not
Yes.
my
Black
jam.
and white. Yeah.
And I know at one time in grad school, we were taught about all or nothing thinking and what that aligns with. And then all of a sudden, it seems like the shift has gone to like all or nothing thinking.
Right.
Where did that
Right.
come from? I remember, yeah, junior college, I had to take like a critical thinking class, and it was very much about like you had to view all different sides and gray and all this, and now we're like really like this go all yeah, there's no the contact, which I don't think it even allows the person a place to grow because it's avoidant. Now, if it's an unsafety issue, there's been trauma, and the person doesn't have capacity to be in that relationship, and the safety is like I need to be out of it for a while to like work on myself. That's one thing, but or to set a boundary, that's different. But there's also this like, how can I build my tolerance? How can I grow and learn how to tolerate things that are uncomfortable? Like maybe a boss that's a little bit toxic, but not outright abusive and not being like directly harmed in a huge way, but it's like uncomfortable and I don't like it. That doesn't mean like I need to maybe go no contact. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to tell somebody what to do, but it might be like, what can you learn from that? And what can your own I hate the word triggers, but your own activating. What are they teaching you and what are they telling you and what might be helpful for you to instead of avoid? Because I'm an avoider. Like that's my go-to is like, I don't want to bring up conflict. I don't want to do that. Like, so I tend to need to avoid. I get it. Or like, but what if we did the opposite and addressed it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of we can have a whole episode about that topic. But
That
yeah.
posture of curiosity, right? That I
Mhm.
think is missing from a lot of these spaces. It's nuance and curiosity. And it's so good. I just so appreciate what you're saying. And maybe we will. We'll just have you on. We'll talk about a whole other like debunking
What is fun?
pop
I'm
psychology. I'm so here for it.
yeah,
I've got another friend we can bring on too.
that'd
Uh,
be fun.
Kara, you have a book club that you kind of offer a list of things that you're enjoying reading and that kind of stuff. And I know in there is sprinkled some really wonderful resources for people who are maybe they're not ready to jump into therapy. Maybe they're just wanting to dip their toe in the water of learning about some of this and doing some self exploration. And we can absolutely drop your list in the show notes, but would love to hear from you. Like, what are some of your go-to resources, books, podcasts, etc., that you're pointing people toward if they're wanting to, like I said, dip their toe into the waters of this work?
Yeah. I would say, it's always changing, but anything on uh, nervous system healing, somatic healing, and I'm really into internal family systems parts work. Is
Yeah. Oh,
those
I
are the
heard you drop a couple little parts language, and I was like, I see.
Yeah, those are the things that I feel like make the biggest shifts is getting in touch with the body, getting in touch with the nervous system, getting in touch with the parts in a safe way. So there's books, there's on I think you're referencing, yeah, book club. I have a book list every month when I send out my email newsletters. I send a weekly newsletter out for either therapists who are wanting to kind of work with me on the training side of things, or even clients who are wanting just to kind of explore themselves and learn more about what's going on with them. I kind of drop like every month I change it. It's like what I'm reading now and like recommended books. And so they're typically on various topics related to reproductive mental health, perimenopause, the nervous system, parts work, ADHD in women. And then sometimes I'll throw in like what I'm reading for fiction right now. And so if you're on my email list, I send that out. I can also, if somebody wanted it, they could reach out to me. The hope is that eventually I'd love to start an actual book club that meets regularly. And I'm trying to figure out, would that be a bit more of on the therapist side of things? Probably that's where I'd go with that, just because it's more unstructured space and you don't have to worry about legalities and all that.
Liability.
Yeah, so book club for therapists in the community that I have for therapists, but for clients, I like to just share here's like recommended resources. And then in all my trainings, I always, my CE trainings, I always give a pretty lengthy resource guide. So depending on the topic, like my perimenopause training for therapists, I give a symptom checklist, questions to ask medical providers so they can give this directly to their clients, or a lot of my therapists are in this stage themselves. They're like, I'm using this for me.
Yeah.
But it also has a list of books, podcasts, experts, websites, and things like that. And I do that for my ADHD training, perimenopause training, reproductive mental health trainings. So I like to give out those resources. And there was one other thing for the wanting to kind of get back in touch with the authentic version of self. I also do a free 90-minute workshop a few times throughout the year that's called It Begins With You. It's webinar style. So people aren't on camera. They don't have to talk. They can just kind of take in information that I'm sharing. And I do cover those 4 pillars that we talked about very lightly, just kind of giving you the information, giving a couple little exercises in the workshop. And then the people can kind of chat if they want to chat and ask a question or something. But it's kind of like a low risk where it's like, I just want to listen to this information, see what Kara has to say, workbook, they get the replay, and that's a free resource I'll do. I have the next ones coming up, probably will happen before, I don't know when you're going to share this episode, but at the end of July, July 29th,
Okay.
it's 3 to 4 p.m. via Zoom. It's open to all states. It's not bound to California like my group is. But anyone who is interested in learning more, just wanting to explore, to get resources, or anyone who's maybe considering joining my group and they just kind of want to get a little taste of it before committing to an 8-week group. And so it's called It Begins With You, and that's a 90-minute workshop. It's on my website. And it's called It Begins With Us. And so us meaning like when we're in the cohort together, we're in a group together, longer term, building a relationship with the group members. And then I'm also facilitating and teaching the components as well.
Awesome. Well, we're absolutely going to include in the show notes every way to find you, your Instagram, your website. Highly recommend subscribing to Kara's email list because as a therapist, but also a woman in her target demographic, like I found so much goodness there. And even like looking at the book club recommendations and that kind of stuff, just really, really excited about what you offer. And I think that bare minimum, just even from that, people are going to get some sense of direction of kind of, okay, if I want to explore this more, here's where I can go. So we'll include all that in the show notes, maybe even a couple of the top 3 recommended books or resources that you are finding. You're like, I'm always handing this one out. I'm always saying, check this out. And like I said, give people some sense of direction. I would love to ask just a couple more questions just to kind of wrap up our time together. I think one of those would be, given the trajectory of your career and the work that you do, where you've chosen to focus your passion, time, energy, what is the one message that you wish every woman could hear and truly believe about herself?
One message. That's hard. Let me think. I'm not going to overthink it. Let me not think. I think that one message is just to show up who you are, who you truly are authentically, and knowing that it's okay if you're not for everyone. That's okay. And when you start to show up that way, I think people gravitate towards people more because it feels authentic. It feels trustworthy and safe, your energy is different. So just showing up as you are. And sometimes I think the trouble is we don't know who that is. And like, how do I do that? And so sometimes there's a little self-discovery that needs to happen, but just be yourself, show up as you are. And don't be afraid to ask for what you need.
I so appreciate that message. I think everybody needs to have that on their mirror, just something as that reminder to show up as they are and ask for what they need. So good. Yeah. Yeah.
And don't forget to show up. That's the thing too, is like,
Yeah.
don't forget to show up.
Like we have to participate. We have to be active participants in our lives.
Showing up is the part of the battle. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just show up.
Oh, I love that, Kara. I love that. Well, I have a set of questions that I often ask guests, and it can kind of just be like kind of quick one-word answers. But what is one unexpected way you've seen yourself change over the last year?
I used to be very, and I catch myself depending on who I'm around, very nervous about speaking my mind. Very nervous about somebody not liking what I have to say. Very like filtering, and just monitoring. And I've noticed that, and again, I don't know if it's like that stage of life where it's like that. I don't care anymore, but I kind of say what's on my mind sometimes, and I'm okay if people disagree. And I don't mean that in a like I'm doing this in a harsh way, and I don't care. I'm gonna just be how I am and harm people. Not like that at all, but just showing up how I am authentically, whether it's goofy, silly, it can come off as, I don't know, flaky, whatever it is. Like whatever it is, I'm just going to be myself and I'm okay with that. And I feel like there's just a different energy about me. Like life feels a little bit lighter. It's not as serious. I can let go of things more easily and it's easier for me to say no.
So good.
Yeah.
What's a surprising source of joy in your current season of life?
I joke because I always try to, buy plants, have a garden, keep things alive. A sense of joy has been like this season. I've kept several plants alive. I'm spending a lot more time outside in my backyard and planting things and staying with it. And so, which I thought, before that was too slow for me, a little too boring. I would get kind of like, lose interest. And surprisingly, it's been something that I found a lot of peace in, is like making time before I start my day to just be outside with my coffee, with my flowers. And the ones that are dying, like, they're fine. And the ones that are living, that's fine too.
Of life, right?
Yeah. So that's just something I kind of like unrelated to work, but that's something I'm finding joy in.
Love it. And the last question is just in the spirit of Breathe, Darling. The title of the podcast is, what's helping you breathe a little easier these days?
Slowing down. Yeah. Slowing down and not doing more and doing less. That's really been the key, but doing less with more intention.
Yeah.
And being fully present for the less. So instead of spreading myself thin, doing less. Yeah.
Lady, all so good. I love it. Oh, Kara, thank you so much for being on today. I know that the listeners are going to absolutely walk away with so many great nuggets of wisdom, truths that we hope they walk away believing it about themselves, or even just some trails to start to follow, to start to explore about themselves and their lives, and hopefully start to find some of that healing that you and I both work so hard to come alongside clients to do. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for listening to another episode of Breathe, Darling, the podcast. It is our joy to bring these conversations to you. These topics are selected with our audience in mind and with the ultimate goal, that you would walk away being able to breathe a little easier, that these conversations would feel connecting and grounding and help you know that you're not alone navigating this crazy journey called life. If you guys can, we would love it if you would take the time, jump in and write a review for the podcast. Take the time to subscribe, like the posts on social media. It means the world to us, as it helps us to expand our reach and let just that many more people know about the message of Breathe, Darling, and this community that we're building. In the meantime, I hope you take good care and breathe easy. Bye.